I spent 2.5 years across Central Africa as a field engineer. I worked in Ghana, worked in Chad, UAE for a while, worked in Scotland, incredible stuff, right? So usually when you go to the well site, there's a head honcho. We call this person the company man. They get paid, $2,500 a day, and they run the stuff. And their voice just puts fear into your heart. And I'll never forget this. So when I said there's a series of light bulbs and epiphanies, this was one of them. I was sitting in the logging unit, which is this almost kind of room where we're looking at measurements that we're taking from a well. And I'm with a French geologist. And this company man comes in. Again, this is, the most important person here at the well site. This is the head honcho. This is the guy who's calling the shots. And he walks in and he looks at the data that's on our screens and he says, "Wow, look at all that oil. Great job, boys." Dude, the French geologist looked at me and said, "What an idiot." This is a water well. There's no oil here. And I was shook. I was. Because it in that moment, it shattered this illusion that you had to know everything about every process to be the boss or to have control of that process.
Yeah.
And so I said, whoa, if this person is running the show and they don't even know what's happening in this logger, then maybe I can also go and run something that I don't necessarily, right? And so really what that is just, managing risk to those that are best suited to manage it.
Yeah.
Right. And so in that case, they were contracting that part of the job, that part of the operations to experts like ourselves, and they're just there to oversee things. And so that just shaped my worldview about what was possible, now knowing that I did not have to be the expert in everything, which I think is what I had maybe learned inadvertently from being at Princeton.
What's up, guys? It's Andrew Baines back with another episode of the Custom Journeys podcast. I am excited, pleased, and privileged to have Jordan Sawadogo.
The privilege part got me. Thank you.
Yes, yeah. And I got the name right? Because I know Sawadogo.
Sawadogo, exactly.
Sawadogo.
Yep.
So I'm really pleased and excited to have Jordan here with us. He's an associate at 500 Global, which is a venture capital firm, also a fellow engineer. Mm-hmm. So I love having engineers on the show. Talk about Jordan's journey from engineering into VC, and then also for you guys who are either current or aspiring entrepreneurs, especially in the tech space, what you guys should be looking for, some of the issues and mistakes, common mistakes that Jordan sees, and then just talk about VC in general, So excited. Jordan, man, I appreciate you for hopping on here. How you been, man?
Of course, man. I've been good.
Nice. Thanks for coming on. So let's go ahead and jump into it. We've been talking quite a bit already off camera about the venture capital world, impact and stuff like that. I mentioned you're an associate at 500 Global. Can you tell us what that means exactly? Like, what do you do at 500 Global?
All right, so we're just gonna jump right into it.
Jump into it, man. I'm gonna push you into the deep end. Let's jump in.
It's good. Let's see if I can swim, right?
Yes.
So I don't have my floaties on. So 500 Global, for those who don't know, we used to be called 500 Startups.
Okay.
Right? And so the genesis, and I'm going to give a little bit of history. It might be
you're good.
Too much of like a digression, right? But I think when people talk about VC, one thing to keep in mind is like other industries, there's been an evolution to it, right? And so the VC kind of game of the 90s looked different than it did of the 2000s and then the 2010s and of today. And so the reason I say that is because 500, we're also changing in terms of, we initially started as just an accelerator. And the idea was that at the early stage, when you're betting on a team, maybe a little bit of an MVP, got a couple customers, but not enough traction to really call product market fit. The thesis there was, let's diversify our bets, right? If we really want to have the unicorns, the Ubers and such of the world, let's go ahead and have batches and get 500 companies, into the batch. Have these founders kind of form a community and almost help each other in their journey to building something incredible. And so in the early days, that worked out. So we were actually a bit contrarian in that sense because we were taking in so many companies, so many batches at a time.
Was it 500 companies per batch, or like was it just kind of stuck at the name?
I don't know if it was 500 per batch.
Yeah, that's a lot.
I mean, people certainly got a lot of eye bags, right? Because they were they were up so late, right? Trying to manage all these. Our current portfolio is about 3,000 companies.
Wow.
So we've, by far exceeded that 500. And right now we're at a point in the own kind of firm life cycle where we're saying, hey, we did a great job on the accelerator side. It's getting a bit crowded for us, right? If we already had these relationships with incredible founders, why not continue to nurture that relationship and be a partner for them as they grow, seed, Series A, so on and so forth.
Nice.
And so really the change from 500 startups to 500 global is a signal that, not only are we a firm that has global ambitions and is a global first firm, but we're also a firm now that wants to be the first check to a founder, right? When they had that initial idea, that initial MVP, but also the last check that they get before their IPO.
Nice.
And so I say all that to say that my role now is kind of, one foot on the early stage, super early stage, pre-seed kind of seed side, but also one foot on the Series A, Series B, what does growth look like, and supporting that journey side.
Okay.
So for the most part, what do? We try and find talented teams that are solving a real problem that can impact the world at scale, and then do whatever we can in our power to support them.
Gotcha.
I think in a nutshell, that's it. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's cool, man. I like that diversity that you get in terms of like being able to work with like those seed stage companies. And so seed stage, because I know some people may not be familiar with the world of VC.
The jargon kills me. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Well, I feel like that's half the battle almost, and it's almost acts as a barrier in a lot of cases where it's like it makes everything seem harder than what it is. So I guess seed stage is like you have an idea, you maybe have you made
Huh? I said it can be intimidating as well, right? If you're on the outside,
exactly. So I like that. Do you guys still do the accelerator component of that?
We do, yeah. So we take about 60 to 80 companies a year in the accelerator. So we're probably top 3 most active, I'd say.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so we have accelerators all across the world. We have one in SF that is a global accelerator.
Yeah.
And that's one that I sit on, yeah.
Do startup founders need to already be making revenue, or like what are you guys looking for, I guess? Or is there like a website you want to just direct them to?
So this is the interesting thing, right?
Yeah.
Markets change, and I think that's something that founders need to pay more attention to. So to your point, what does seed mean, right?
Yeah.
Well, the definition of seed today is different than the definition that it was 10 years ago.
Okay.
But that's not necessarily something that's discussed sort of publicly unless you're already in the know, right?
Yeah.
So we do take companies that are pre-revenue, but what we're seeing overall right now is a general slowdown, right? In general, investors like certainty, right? Just in the world, for commerce, for business in general. If there's certainty, I can plan. And right now, there's a ton of uncertainty globally, right? You have rising inflation, which has been hitting domestically. You have uncertainty around energy security, which is also impacting households here. You have also this geopolitical tension with the war in Ukraine.
Still.
Right, still. That's kind of in the mix. The supply chains, China has been zero COVID for a long time. Maybe they're changing their stance, but that's still an area of uncertainty. And then a lot of the growth that people got really excited about, especially on the consumer side, just hasn't materialized. And so you're seeing layoffs from Amazon, you're seeing layoffs from Meta, right? You're seeing layoffs from Snapchat because the spending power just isn't there. And so as a result, you're seeing slowdown in the public markets, and that's percolating its way down to us at the early stage.
Gotcha.
And so in this day and age now, you can be pre-revenue, but you have to be a super talented team. For most folks, I would say in this day and age, you got to have a little bit of traction, a little bit of customers buying in.
Okay, gotcha. And so this might be the last question on this track.
Go ahead.
But for that traction component, what are you guys looking for there? Is it like, hey, you need to be out there doing like customer discovery, whether it's like interviewing people, finding out if this is something they're actually looking for? Or like, what have you kind of seen that works as a good way to kind of gauge how much traction you have?
All right, so this is so you said you're happy to talk to an engineer, right?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So traction has a temporal component to it, and I think people forget that, right?
Yeah.
So traction at different stages means different things, right? Traction, if I'm gonna be a Series B company, looks materially different than say traction at a pre-seed. And end of the day, the reason that people focus on traction is that it's the best way or it's the best proxy to say, listen, we're building something that the market wants. And so even if you're pre-revenue, again, traction can be, hey, we've spoken to these customers and we've verified that this is a real pain point.
Yeah.
Right. And we verified that, they're willing to pay X, X dollars as a premium for the solution that we're providing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. It could even be like a wait list for like a, I don't know, digital platform or.
Potentially. So waitlists are kind of tricky, right?
Yeah.
Because in some sense, they're seen as a vanity metric, right?
I can see that.
Because really, like, what do you have to do to get onto a wait list? There's not a lot of friction there.
Collect an email.
Exactly,
You're pretty
right?
much good.
There's not a lot of friction there, right?
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't necessarily, so a wait list could lead to traction,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't necessarily say it's a good indicator of traction. Now,
Okay.
if you have a wait list where people actually have to put down a deposit,
Yeah.
I'll take that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Right?
All right.
All
right. Nice. So 500 Global started off as 500 startups as an accelerator. You guys realized, hey, we're making a lot of connections, a lot of value added. Went from there to wanting, or not wanting, but starting to write some checks for people. Good work. But before you became an associate, well, let me ask you this. What's a typical day like for an associate at a VC firm? Are you like waking up at 5 a.m., going through like 100 emails from
Cue the
aspiring?
Rocky music and stuff.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
What's a typical day like for you,
man.
Jordan?
I wish I could get through 100 emails in a day. My inbox is terrible, by the way. I probably have 13,000 unreads right now.
Gosh.
Yeah, and I'm not the only one. It's just
Can't get to that. Yeah.
It's funny, right? People realize that you're writing checks, and you just get a lot of inbound. The days are super varied, which is what I love, right?
Okay.
So I think better than maybe a typical day can say a typical week, like what I do in a week.
Yeah.
So I'd say 20% of my time is sourcing.
Okay.
So what does sourcing mean, right? It means we're trying to identify interesting trends in the market that excite us. Pockets of the economy that we think are ripe for disruption.
Okay.
And areas where we think either might be underserved or still have room for growth. And the reason I include this in sourcing is that, and we'll probably talk about this, I think, a bit later, right, for careers in VC, but the best folks in the business, I think, are the ones that can develop strong thesis of what they're looking for. And the reason I say that is, again, getting back to this 13,000 emails, if you don't know what you're looking for, you become super easily distracted.
Gotcha.
And if you have 100 deals or so that you're looking at in a week, that distraction is just going to be an incredible overhead on your time, on your efficiency, and also on your ability to be systematic in how you analyze and assess deals.
Gotcha.
So 20% of my time is on sourcing, thesis development. And then once we have an area that we're excited about, we go out and we say, hey, who are people that are building in this space, right? What are some talented teams that have compelling backgrounds, that are maybe thinking about the market in a new way, or have an insight that others don't, and innovation can come in many forms, right? It can come on the technology side, right? Maybe we're using a stack that just makes us better than the competitors. It can also come on the business model side, right? Which is one of the reasons why everyone got excited about SaaS, right?
Yeah.
Because we're now pricing things in a way that makes the barrier for commerciality lower, and that gives us a certain stickiness, a certain repeatability to our revenue.
Yeah.
And so, we screen for that on the sourcing. I'll say another 20% of my time is talking to other investors. It's a super opaque market, man.
Really?
And we make our money in data asymmetry, right?
Gotcha.
And so you're talking to investors, you're seeing, hey, what are you guys seeing? How are you thinking about this space? How are you thinking about deals? And it's super important for where we play to develop relationships with what we call downstream capital, right?
Okay.
So if you think about the life cycle of a company, right?
Yeah.
And we're talking a traditional life cycle of a tech company. In this day and age, they might go through a friends and family round. I know for a lot of people that's still not accessible route, right? And so,
Yeah.
I know you're looking at me like, Jordan, what are you talking about, man?
$1,000 here,
Yeah, it's
couple there.
yeah.
But
I
it's
know.
I know some people who've raised hundreds of thousands.
It's a luxury for
Yeah.
sure, for sure. It's a luxury and it's a privilege. But you'll go through a couple of different equity rounds, right? From
Yeah.
your pre-seed to your seed, your Series A, Series B, and then ideally pre-IPO, right? And the players who can support you at those different stages look for different things in a deal. They look for different growth profiles, different metrics of the business. And so when we see a company that we like, again, maybe this could be early stage, they have some customers that they've signed on, we're getting excited about what they're building. We need to make sure that they're positioned in a way where they can also get people that write larger checks excited about what they're building. And to that end, to do this job well, you have to have not just like the market intelligence of what's to come, but also the market understanding of those that will provide the capital after you. What are their metrics? How do they look about the market? What do they care about?
Okay.
So that you can coach your companies and say, listen, these are the criteria that you need to hit to become attractive to folks that can write you a $5 million check, a $10 million check, a $20 million check.
Gotcha.
So,
Man, no, that's exciting.
Yeah.
So that's good stuff, man. So I mean, sourcing, talking to other investors,
Investor relations,
when-
market
when-
research, yeah.
Okay. When real quick on talking to other investors, I'm assuming that there's some competition going on there as well, right? So are these like established partnerships that you guys have identified, or like how do you guys figure out like, hey, like if I'm JP Morgan Chase, I'm just throwing out a bank.
Sure,
like maybe
sure.
I don't want to talk to investors from Bank of
Sure,
America. Maybe
sure.
they're our primary competitors. Like how do you kind of decide who's who?
Oh, definitely. There's absolutely competition.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, and again, I know we talked about hot takes and stuff and me getting crucified and stuff, but
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and this is my hot take.
Give it. I saw that moment where you thought about it.
You
Should I say
saw
that?
it, right? Competition can make collaboration challenging for first-time fund managers,
Okay.
who are all trying to prove themselves to
Yeah.
the market, right? And so in our case, first-time fund managers could be, or not could be, but we're starting to see more and more fund managers from diverse backgrounds. It could be people of color, LGBT community,
Yeah.
women fund managers and stuff. But in general, there's more competition within the same stage,
Yeah.
and there's less competition across stages, right?
Okay.
So if I'm looking at a pre-seed company, right? I
Yeah.
actually don't have a lot of competition with folks at the seed level because we're competing on different terms.
Gotcha.
We're writing different checks. We're taking different ownerships,
Okay.
And so we actually need each other as a partnership for this to work.
Gotcha.
The folks at the seed stage need to have partnerships with people at the pre-seed because that's going to form a large part of their pipeline.
Gotcha.
Right? And so maybe, they've seen something interesting in the market or they've seen a trend that they want to put a bet on, but the founder might be too early. And so they might say, hey, Jordan, we just saw this company that's doing something really interesting in AI-assisted drug discovery.
Yeah.
They're not quite at the stage where we're comfortable investing, but why don't you give them a look?
Why don't you give them some money?
Yeah,
See if
yeah,
it works out.
Exactly,
If it works
exactly,
out,
exactly.
send them our way.
Yeah, exactly,
Okay.
De-risk it for us, right?
Yeah.
And so you see a lot of that happening kind of upstream to downstream, downstream to upstream, right?
Okay. Cool. Man, this is exciting stuff.
Yeah.
I gotta let me put a pin in the VC talk right there for a minute.
Sure.
Just because I want to kind of get to some of your background before you got to where you're at. And so man, you've kind of lived all over the country, East Coast of the US. You lived in Africa for a little bit. Back in high school, you were running 400 meters on the track and field scene.
Did your research, man?
I did a little bit of research.
Yeah.
Did you compete in Gainesville, by the way? Like
Painful days. Huh?
Did you compete in Florida at one point? Like maybe a track meet or something out there?
No. So I
Because I saw something, it was like 50.98. And I was like, is this the same Jordan? I don't know.
Whoa. Okay. So my PR was, I'm pretty sure it was 48 something.
All right,
so I'm just going to say that the research team here needs to,
Hey, so that's a different Jordan then.
Yeah, exactly.
Same spelling.
My doppelganger, someone out there. But I wasn't that fast in track, man.
Really?
I didn't become fast until my senior year of high school. I'd already been accepted to all these colleges, and yeah.
Yeah.
So I moved around a lot
Yeah.
growing up, right? And sports to me was just a way to make friends before the school year started. Yeah,
Perfect.
So
That makes-
So I would do cross country so I could have lunch with some kids, right?
Yeah.
In August, so that come the first day of school, I wasn't looking around like, where am I?
Yeah.
But I hated running. I absolutely hated running.
Running is the worst, man.
Yeah.
Because you're just out there with just you and your brain, just
Yep.
thinking, and you're like,
Yep.
dang, this is a
Yep.
long run.
And it's like I can slow down and get bored.
Yeah.
Or I can speed up and have my body hurt.
Exactly.
You know?
So yeah, I hated track and field. Just
Yeah.
did it so that I would get faster because I loved playing football at the time. So I completely understand that. But so did you? I saw you went to Princeton. Did you get a scholarship to go from running track, or how did that kind of work?
No, so Princeton at the time, and I think this is still the case, they don't give out athletic scholarships.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Okay.
we're kind of going back here, but I've always wanted to be an engineer.
Really? Okay.
Not always wanted, but
Yeah.
probably in the 7th grade, I became really enamored with this idea of engineering.
What was the motivation that sparked that?
So two. So one, I went to a British school in West Africa, in
Okay.
Benin, that didn't have the strongest regulations about what could or could not be done in chemistry class.
Oh God.
Yeah, and so we saw
Y'all
some
doing all
experiments
kinds of-
that probably would have had schools here shut down. And so so you're like a 12-year-old boy,
Yeah.
and right, explosions are cool. And then jokes aside, there's just something really fascinating about if you can understand the rules of nature,
Yeah.
then you can also get these building blocks, almost like a recipe book, and kind of build anything. And that really, really, really like enticed me. And so that was kind of the first inkling of, oh, this could be something that I could see myself doing.
Yeah.
Right? And then in 7th grade, I had a crush on a science teacher. I noticed, true story, and her husband was a chemical engineer. And so I figured, hey, not only can I do this really cool science, but it's gonna be a pull for the ladies.
Yeah, that's funny how the young mind of a young boy works at times. It's like it always happens, right?
Yeah.
You got a crush on a teacher,
Yeah.
or counselor, or somebody. So that's funny.
So I was set, and so then the next question was, well, what are the best institutions for engineering?
Yeah.
So I applied to all the engineering schools, and my dad is a first-generation immigrant, and so
Okay.
optionality is a big thing for him. So I applied to like 13 schools.
Wow.
Yeah,
I did one.
I was busy. Good for you, man.
I was like last minute. I knew I was going to go to college, but I was
Yeah,
like, didn't take it
yeah,
serious. But
yeah,
13, that's impressive.
Yeah. How did you have that certainty, though? Just out of curiosity, yeah.
LSU was my first primary school. I was from Houston.
Okay.
We went and took a visit to LSU, and we looked at the out-of-state tuition, and my parents looked at me like, son,
Yep.
I know you want to go here,
Yep.
but you need to start thinking about something more reasonable, more affordable.
Yep.
So then at that point, I was good student, AB student, top 10% until like the last semester where I was like, senioritis hit me hard.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I fell out of the top 10.
It's a
and,
thing.
Yeah, and UT Austin was going to be the next choice. Texas A&M was also up there. I took like one SAT, didn't do well, and the counselor was like, I don't really know if you should even apply. And I'm like,
Oh,
really?
wow.
Yeah, and I think if
That's
she would have
terrible.
said,
Yeah.
looking back, because I
Yeah.
knew some of the guys that went there, and I was
Yeah.
like, if they went, there's no
Sure.
way
Sure.
I couldn't have got in.
Well, Michelle Obama's counselor said, "Hey, you shouldn't be applying to Ivy Leagues either." So
Yeah, so I mean, at that point, I wish I would have had that
Yeah.
mindset, but in the end, it worked out. I took a visit to UTSA, University of Texas San Antonio.
Sure.
I loved it.
Sure.
First year was like a lot of student loans, but by the second year, I was getting like school paid for.
Okay.
And I was like full ride at that
Yeah,
point. So I was
yeah.
like, it worked out in the end.
interesting.
But yeah, that's kind of what happened to me.
Yeah. So we share that because ultimately, I picked Princeton because they gave me the most financial aid.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't free.
Yeah.
Right. But they gave me considerably more than any other school. And they also had one of the more diverse student bodies.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not perfect.
Yeah.
But also
compared to the
better than-
others, respectively, is like more diverse.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And they had a phenomenal chemical engineering program.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, I'm going to get my double PhD in, chemistry and math and, so I was, you know?
Go back, get my science teacher, woo her away from.
Exactly, you know? So I was playing the long game, super long
Yeah.
game, right?
Gotcha.
And so I had to walk onto the track team. So to get back to your
Oh,
initial
you walked
point,
on. Okay.
I had to walk on, man.
Okay.
Yeah. And I had a big chip on my shoulder,
Yeah.
which in hindsight was probably to my detriment because I spent a lot of time trying to, you know, prove myself on the field. I got
Yeah.
injured a lot and stuff. But I wouldn't change anything because I really, really enjoyed the team and those guys. But yeah.
What? Real quick, why did
story
you
there.
why did you run track in college? Was it the same reason as high school, like getting more friends, connecting with people, or what? Because I mean, you had the financial aid regardless. They didn't give
Yeah.
you a scholarship to run
Yeah,
track. So
yeah,
what was
yeah.
the motivation? Because
That's
running
an interesting
sucks.
question. It does. Yeah. Why did I do that to
Why did you do
myself?
that to yourself, Jordan?
Yeah. I'm really interested in being part of teams that are building for something greater than yourself.
Gotcha.
And I think for me, again, the sports component was just a way that I could exercise that.
Okay.
You know, so I went to high school in Maryland. I played basketball there.
Yeah.
I swam for a brief bit. I played tennis as well.
Yeah.
And
Nice.
so there's that community aspect as well
Yeah.
at Princeton that I loved. And I was also just curious to see, you know, how far could I push my own body. End of the day.
Okay.
You know, track and running, as you know, it's one of those weird sports, man, where delayed gratification is a thing.
Yeah.
You know?
It really is, especially like from a competition standpoint. Like, I don't know, practice sucks, but when you compete and like you really push yourself and you see like the end result of that, it's like, dang, I really did that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It's very fulfilling. So I hated track in terms of practice, but the competition component, man, I love that. Like, I don't know, but
I love to compete, man.
yeah.
Yeah, I still, I mean, I don't do it as much these days because my knees hurt. But I mean, I'll speed walk people for no reason in public, and they have no idea that we're racing, right?
They don't even know. They're like, well, I'm about to dust you real quick.
Yeah, exactly. You know?
All right.
So I love it.
Good stuff, man. So went to Princeton. Hey, real quick, any words of advice for anybody that's looking to get into an Ivy League? And maybe even a more particular, specific study engineering at an Ivy League?
I mean, go to a place where you feel like you can grow as a person, and that could be academically, right? That could be intellectually. That could be emotionally, right? I mean, there's all these different aspects of development that happen as a university, and it's a really special place. I mean, really, like, what other points in your life do you have 4 to 5 years to just nurture yourself, right? I mean, as adults, I mean, I'll admit that. I mean, people go into therapy sessions, right?
Yeah.
To do precisely that, but yet you have this window where you're kind of insulated from the outside world. Not everyone, I know people, circumstances are different, but for the most part, it's really one of the few times in your life where that's an opportunity to you. So I think less about the prestige and less about the institution. It's really about what is the fit here for me, and I didn't do this enough, but I think more students should just try and understand that. You know, talk to current students, go visit, and really see if you can see yourself there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Do you kind of leverage that Princeton network from college, or is it kind of is that a big draw or big benefit?
Absolutely. And we're talking about this as well, right? And I sound like my parents right now, but life is not a meritocracy.
Hey, not at all.
You know,
not at all. Not one bit, really.
Yeah, and it's one of the more frustrating, I'll say, elements, part of my day, part of my being, part of my existence. But there are absolutely benefits to the alumni network. You know, I would. Yeah. I don't know how far, down you want me to go here. What should I?
Hey, it's up to you. You got full range, you know.
Yeah.
If there's anything in particular, like, I guess that could add value, hit on it. But if not, I mean, we could go on. It's cool.
Yeah. I mean, so things that I would look for, right, if I'm going to assess not the quality, but maybe the breadth of the alumni community.
Yeah.
What are the alumni in, right?
Okay.
So, for instance, let's say that I'm super passionate about the arts, right?
Yeah.
And I want to go and I just have a way of like creating and telling stories that very few people in this world can do.
Gotcha.
Would I say go to Princeton so that you can become a top filmmaker? Probably not, right? But if I said, hey, on the other hand, I don't know, let's say that you're super interested about some component of economics or finance, right?
Or maybe
Could be-
even
could
law.
be corporate or law or banking, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a strong alumni community there, right? We have a history of using that for social good.
Yeah.
So alumni connections are important. Some schools are better than others at nurturing them. I mean, I get hit up like every month to give back to Princeton.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And what's crazy is that it's usually a student hitting me up and saying, "Hey, man, I saw you doing X, Y, and Z. We're trying to get funding for this program."
Yeah.
And I give back. So one of the things that happened on our track team, my sophomore year, we took a 2-week trip to Greece,
Oh, okay.
fully
Nice.
paid for, man.
Nice.
Yeah.
Just a track field trip.
Track field trip,
Hey,
man.
that's cool.
Paid for by the alumni of other track athletes.
Oh, word.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They just felt it would add value to you guys. They're like, get on the plane.
You're being like an ambassador of the sport. You know?
Okay.
Yeah. And so we spent a week in Athens. We raced a bunch of local track and field teams there.
Okay.
Just made like some super interesting
That's
connection.
cool.
Broaden your worldview. Yeah. And so now when a sophomore on the track team, emails me or texts me and says, "Hey, man, we're thinking about going to Brazil as a team.
Yeah.
It would really mean a lot if you contributed. I contribute.
Yeah. Send them a message. You better not lose when you're racing.
you better
out
not.
there to the locals, boy.
You
better represent us well.
Exactly.
Represent us real well. All right.
Take photos of the beach for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, that's
yeah.
cool. I like that. After you went to Princeton, let me go back and check these notes,
Oh,
man.
sure.
I saw you had a number of roles: wireline, field engineer. You even had an internship at NASA as a materials scientist.
So I took time off from school.
Oh,
I
word?
did, man.
Oh, that's why. Because I saw it was a year-long internship
I
at
did.
NASA. That's what that was. Well,
Part of that.
Why? You just wanted to make more money, or you were like, you really wanted to test out and see, hey, is this
I
something
don't
that I
think you
want to
make
do?
money working for the government, man.
That's a good point. That might not have been a.
No knock on NASA. Love the place, but that is
Yeah.
that is not where you will be the next Elon Musk, right? If that's
Yeah.
what you aspire to be. Oh, you work with brilliant and passionate people, but public sector, private sector, whole other story. But no, I took a break for a couple of reasons. But the first was just mental health, man. I needed a break.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I could see that. Princeton, very taxing, it seems like it'd be a very rigorous program. Then also add in walking onto the track team.
Exactly.
So that could be a
I was
lot.
also dancing as well.
Oh, you were dancing too?
Which you didn't get into, yeah. I'm not going to demo it right now again because of my knees.
What kind of dance were you doing?
Contemporary, modern, hip hop.
Okay.
I didn't do it for long again because I was injured.
Oh, okay.
But it was just one of these things that I was interested in. And decided
Man, you
to
get into everything.
Explore. I'm telling you, man.
Cool.
Yeah. So I took almost a year off. And so the way that Princeton worked at the time was the minimum time off was a year. So I think technically it was a semester, but academically it was a year.
Okay.
And I went back to my high school and I coached, actually.
Oh, nice.
I did, man.
Track
It
and
was
field?
Super fulfilling. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I coached someone to her first state championship.
What?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know why I'm taking credit for it. She ran the race. I just showed up.
Oh,
yeah.
God.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. I feel like that's you said you were gonna ask me. You didn't ask me this question, but
yeah.
you said you were gonna ask me
Yeah.
questions during this podcast,
Yeah.
which is rare, but I welcome
Yeah.
it.
Okay, okay.
But no, I briefly for a
bad.
second, I thought about going and being a teacher and a coach at high school.
Okay.
Where I was trying to figure. I was in this career.
Yeah.
I don't know. Career purgatory almost
Sure,
or whatever, like
sure.
trying to figure out which way.
Sure.
And I realized like I wanted to go that route because I knew it would be fulfilling.
Yeah.
I had done some like tutoring part time while working at GM, and it's a very fulfilling role to like kind of give back and pour into students and everything. So
It was. And I think what was super challenging for me at that time, and one of the reasons why I was in this like just mental cacophony of crisis and whatnot was that my value system at that point was really predicated on what you receive out of life is sort of proportional to what you put in. And I'm not saying that's not the case, But I had been injured in track. Academically was also super hard for me as well because I was overcommitted, right? I was super thin. I just felt like I wasn't, I mean, to put it bluntly, I just felt like a failure in many aspects. And so I needed to step away from that environment,
Yeah.
from school, from the competition, etc., and reestablish, new sets of values for myself
Yeah.
that were less about the outcomes and the achievements, and to your point, more about the journey.
Yeah.
And part of that journey, at least for me, was rediscovering why I enjoyed the sport. And so, as a coach, there are all these things that you rediscover and relearn that feel your passion, that are not
Yeah.
necessarily tied to how fast someone has run. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting point because I know outside world would look at you and say, track and field athlete, Princeton student, on the track team at Princeton. For most people in the Black community, that's like a huge success, right?
Sure.
Well, how did you kind of walk through that process of reconfiguring your value system and not necessarily just focusing on the outcome, but the journey and everything along the way? Was it mentors? Was it your parents? Was it like something spiritual? What was it kind of there?
Ironically, it was a psychiatrist pointing out to me that if I was really worried about the outcomes, taking a step back to reevaluate my own value system was the best way of achieving those outcomes. And prior to that, I mean, I really tried to fight it,
Okay.
Mentors told me, coaches told me, parents told me, but you really try and fight it. Just having that accessibility to
Yeah.
the world is, you realize that the barometers for success might be orders of magnitude different. So to your point, right?
Yeah.
Black student doing chemical engineering, one of 3 people of color, right, in that class.
Yeah.
Also competing in track and field, a successful story, right? But within that community, within that environment, success might mean, hey, are you going to go and found, a multi-billion-dollar company at some point, right? Because we had children whose parents did exactly that.
Yeah.
And so that kind of reconfiguration, I think, was also a challenge for me.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So ultimately, it was realizing that continuing down this path, that the status quo is unsustainable, and it was not an easy decision to make. It took me probably 4 to 5 months to actually come to terms with it, come to peace with it. So it was a process. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. And actually, one of the more recent, this interview will probably come out in 2023, but
Okay. Happy New Year, everybody. Yeah.
one of the more recent podcast episodes I published was a guy, Mike Martin. He's a product manager at the NBA. And he talked about while working at General Mills, Emmanuel Acho came and spoke to the employees there. And one of the things he talked about was goals are dumb.
Sure.
And talked about you shouldn't really be focused on these specific goals, specific outcomes that a lot of times you can't really control.
Sure.
Like you can say, hey, like your goal, you as a high school student say, hey, my goal is to go to the NFL.
Yep.
He was saying that's dumb.
Yep.
Like you should more so have a goal that's more so about the journey and the process of you becoming a better player and being the best player you can be.
Sure.
A lot of things you can't really control.
Yep.
So don't focus specifically and solely on that outcome.
Yeah.
More so the journey and the process of becoming a better person. and
Exactly.
everything.
I would maybe put a few asterisks there, right?
Yeah. I think so.
I think having some data along the way is beneficial.
Yeah.
But to that point, I'm blanking on this name, but the person who comes and they speak during your graduation.
Commencement
There we go,
ceremony.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So our speaker was an alum named Michael Lewis.
Okay.
So he wrote Liar's Poker. He wrote Moneyball. He wrote
Oh, wow.
Flash Boys, right?
Yeah.
So renowned author, super successful by many metrics. And his whole talk to us was, listen, even though you're graduating from this incredible institution, don't underestimate the role of luck in your success. So to your point, right, getting back to this idea about all these external factors beyond your control that influence these outcomes. And his lucky break happened, and I'm paraphrasing here and whatnot, but it happened in part because of a dinner that he went to, and he just happened to sit next to someone that eventually led to him working in finance. And that's also how I got my job in Houston.
Really?
I went to a happy hour, man. I went to a happy hour, and I just happened to run into someone that would eventually get me an interview to a company that hired me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that 500 Global or another job?
No, this was after I graduated with my master's in reservoir engineering from Imperial.
Yeah.
And I was in Houston because Europe was going through Brexit.
Yeah.
The job market there was still a little tough for Americans. And so I was told, Houston is an interesting place for energy. So I booked a one-way ticket. I came down here to finish my thesis. And I went to a happy hour. I was getting margaritas in the energy corridor and was having a terrible night because I was in a bad mood. And so on my way out, so I heard someone kind of laughing. And it was this tall Iranian dude. And he said, "Oh, has anyone ever told you you look like Obama, right?" And again, I didn't want to have anything of this, right? I was like, "Yeah, I'm a secret love child. Don't tell anyone about it, right?"
Yeah.
And he thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
And so we ended up chatting for like an hour that night. And it turned out that they were hiring for a role that I was interested in.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I went home. I sobered up.
Yeah.
I sent my CV. I maybe exaggerated about some of my qualifications on coding, and then I got an interview 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that's wild. That's wild. Yeah, I think I hate I kind of don't like the word luck because I feel like it leaves too much stuff up to chance, but at the same time it is chance, right?
Sure.
Like what's the likelihood of you getting that job if you didn't go to the happy hour?
Exactly.
Like that may have been a company or a job you didn't even know about before going. So I definitely think, having the preparation beforehand is key and critical. Like if you didn't have those skill sets that you could put on the CV, it wouldn't have panned out. But definitely there's a lot to say about just chance, right place, right time, and being prepared for that moment.
And I find as well that paying attention to the journey just brings you peace.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, at least for me in many aspects, I can go to sleep well knowing that I'm staying true to that journey.
Yeah.
And I'm building along the way, rather than being hyper focused on a particular outcome for any given year. Yeah.
Man, I'm not gonna lie. You had me when you said the guy said to Obama.
Oh yeah.
Not necessarily the looks. I'm thinking about like the journey, right?
Oh, okay, got you. Yeah.
African father, Midwestern.
It's uncanny. I told you.
Mom,
secret
Ivy League,
secret love child, man. So
this is wild.
I told you. Yeah. America, it's just. I should stop.
Hey, you should keep going, man. We should keep going. Okay. Hey, but I think that's a crazy story of like how you landed that job in the energy sector. Kind of talk to me about that transition where you realized, hey, you wanted to go from engineering into VC, and what do you think was the best thing that kind of prepared you for that pivot?
Okay. Since this is a long podcast, and hopefully people aren't too bored yet.
No, they're entertained, man.
We're gonna back up a little bit.
Yeah.
Because to your point, a lot of these external factors, I didn't realize that VC was a career option to me 5 years ago.
Okay.
I generally didn't. Even though I had been a founder in West Africa, it never dawned on me that it was an accessible path to me.
Yeah.
Right. And so when I tell this story, I take my time because really it was a series of epiphanies, of light bulbs kind of going off that led me to this place.
Okay.
So for all those, I guess, folks that are out there that are trying to make a 5-year plan, don't stress too much. I've actually did this last year. I went back and looked at every 5-year plan that I've made over my life.
All trash.
Wildly inaccurate.
Oh man.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you've done a similar thing.
Yeah, my first one actually panned out the way I wrote it. At 17, I wrote a 5-year plan, and I would be working at General Motors.
Okay.
Yeah, and then after that,
good for you though. Yeah.
Things just went all the way any other direction that you can kind of think of. But the first one panned out. After that, all bets were off.
Okay, so then take Andrew's advice then on your 5-year plan. So I got into chemical engineering because I was really enamored, not just with my 7th grade teacher, but with this idea that you could create things, right?
Okay.
Chemists introduce new compounds, but chemical engineers allow you to deliver at scale and truly have an impact for the masses, right? And I was interested as well in clean water, and
Okay.
clean water access. And so my thesis at Princeton was looking at low energy ways of desalinating seawater.
I wanted that to be my senior design project.
You're kidding?
I did.
Okay.
I really did for my bachelor's degree in mechanical
Wow.
engineering.
Okay.
But
Interesting.
our advisor was like, where are you going to get all the power from to like do the desalination process? I'm like, I don't know. We'll figure this thing out. But
Interesting.
we kind of steered us down a different
Interesting.
route that had funding. But
Should have
when
said
I found out,
cyclopentane.
hey, I wish. Like,
Hydrates with cyclopentane.
yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, man, it didn't pan out. But when I found out about desalination, I was
Okay.
like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
This is exciting.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
What excited you about it? Yeah.
I've always had, so my background, my parents really, everything is service oriented, giving back, having an impact in what you do. And even in the engineering space, I didn't want to just do work in oil and gas just to work in oil and gas,
Sure.
make a lot of money,
Sure.
which was kind of the expectation for some people being so close to Houston
Sure,
and
sure.
being from Houston.
Sure.
So I just saw, I was looking at green energy, alternative energy
Which year was this?
solutions. Huh?
Which year?
This was senior year
Okay.
year of my bachelor's degree.
Okay,
So this is
so-
like 2012.
That's pretty forward looking, man. Because shale was kind of picking up in 2012, and you're thinking about green and
Yeah, yeah. And
okay.
I will say, like, I made some connections with faculty members at UTSA, and they were forward looking in energy and everything
Okay,
like that. So that kind of helped as well. But I wanted to do something that was like impactful, not just like,
Sure.
oh, we made a bracket that
Sure.
saves you manufacturing costs and prevents whatever
Sure.
from happening. I'm like, that's
Sure,
boring
sure.
as hell.
Sure.
Like, so yeah,
Yeah.
desalination. I was like, whoa, this can be a really big solution, especially if you look at like countries, even America. Like you think about like Jackson, Mississippi, or it didn't happen at the time, but even like Flint, Michigan,
Yeah.
like all these places where they have
Super expensive. Yeah.
exactly. So that was kind of the motivation behind it. I wanted to do something that engineering wise had an impact on the economy, not just the economy, but the community.
Okay. And for those who don't know or who don't have engineering backgrounds, desalination, right?
I appreciate that. Break
Yeah.
it down.
Yeah. Basically, process of removing salt from water and purifying it so that it can become potable.
Yeah.
Either you can drink it, use it for irrigation, some kind of use. And the reason it's such a, I think, key term and kind of key focus is, and the numbers here might be a little bit off, but it's like 97% of all water is non-potable, and I think only 3% is kind of fresh water.
It's something like that.
know?
Ridiculous.
Yeah. And so traditionally, the way that people have done this is they'll take seawater or brackish water or something that has some kind of impurities in it,
Yeah.
and they will essentially push it through a membrane that traps all those impurities. And as you do this, on the other side, you get fresh, potable water that you can use.
Reverse osmosis.
Exactly. And the problem with that is that although it works, it's super energy intensive.
Yeah.
Takes a lot of money, takes a lot of power. And so in some places, it could be Jackson, could be Flint, the economics make it very difficult to actually generate and service potable water.
Yeah.
And so the two of us, and you in particular, we're looking at ways of making this more affordable and easier to roll out. So
Yeah.
very cool.
And I'm not gonna go too far off
Yeah.
topic. I was kind of pissed off when like a couple years or a few years later, somebody came up with like a straw, and you just put the straw in the water and you drink
sure.
out of it, and had like the filter in
That's
it.
all that you have to do.
And
Yeah.
it's not. I don't think they do desalination,
Yeah.
but still, I was like, yo, that's.
Sure. You're just
And the advisor
shaking
was
your
like, you
fists.
need something ridiculous pump to make this happen. And I was like, God damn it. But
Yeah.
okay, but cool.
But that's the challenge, right? Is because the same advisors, I'm presuming, put you onto this alternative energy kind of impact-driven application of engineering.
Yeah.
But in some ways, they're also like an impediment to you also pursuing the reality of that vision. So
True.
yeah,
True.
it's a balance, right? How much of the not authoritarian, but how much of the authority figure knowledge do you digest, and how much of it do you say, hey, that's interesting, but I'm gonna take a different route here.
Gotcha. Exactly. Good point. Man, sorry I got you off point. But so you, in the journey from engineering to VC, first part of it was for your capstone project. You were working on a desalination device.
Exactly. Interested in desalination, right?
Okay.
And there weren't a lot of water companies that were hiring at that time.
Yeah.
And so I figured the next best thing that I could do was to go work for an energy company.
Okay.
And I was incredibly naive at this point. So Schlumberger came to our school and they recruited, and they 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 actually denied me my first time. So I applied and they were like, nope.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And I called the recruiter and I was like, what the hell, man? I mean, I didn't use that language, right? But
Yeah.
but essentially it was, this.
What's going on?
Yeah, exactly.
I got check every box.
Surely there must be a mistake here, right? And their response was, listen, this role, which is in the field, harsh conditions, ridiculous working hours, we're not necessarily sure that you're cut out for this role, right? And so
Yeah.
they're worried that 3 months in, I'd realize I didn't like it, and because of my
Princeton
background,
grad.
I could just jump ship and go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so I actually had to write them a letter saying, no, you don't understand. I run the half mile at school. I understand putting myself through pain,
Yeah.
just to shave off like 2 seconds on a 2-lap race, which is
Man.
arbitrary. And so they said yes to that. And so my reasoning here was they had a water division. And so I thought if I could get in through the energy group,
Yeah.
within a year's time, I could just raise my hand and say, listen, I've been doing excellent work. Why don't you transfer me?
Good approach.
Well,
Didn't
as we
work
know
out that
now,
way.
as adults, that is no way how corporate America.
Yeah. But a good
Works,
thought process. Yeah.
Sure. I appreciate it. So this was me thinking outside the box, which ironically put me in a box.
Yeah.
And so fast forward, I spent the next 2.5 years across Central Africa as a field engineer.
Okay.
Yeah, I worked in Ghana, worked in Chad, went to UAE for a while. I was in Equatorial Guinea.
Oh, that's cool.
Worked in Scotland. Incredible stuff, right?
Yeah.
And you think about it, you're what, 22, 23 at the time, and you're managing, these multi-million-dollar projects.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of cases, you are the lead engineer there. And so, not only are you managing the financials of the project, but you're also managing all the crew, all the personnel. So there's quite an amount of responsibility. And you're doing this for the oil and gas operator. So usually when you go to the well site, there's a head honcho. We call this person the company man.
Okay.
And they get paid, $2,500 a day, and they run the stuff. And their voice just puts fear into your heart.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget this. So when I said there was a series of light bulbs and epiphanies,
Yeah.
this was one of them. I was sitting in the logging unit, which is this, almost kind of room where we're looking at measurements that we're taking from a well, and I'm with a French geologist. And this company man comes in. Again, this is, the most important person here at the well site. This is the head honcho. This is the guy who's calling the shots. And he walks in and he looks at the data that's on our screens and he says, "Wow, look at all that oil. Great job, boys." And he walks out.
What the hell's going on?
Dude, the French geologist looked at me and said, "What an idiot. This is a water well. There's no oil here." And I was shook. I was. Because it in that moment, it shattered this illusion that you had to know everything about every process to be the boss or to have control of that process.
Yeah.
And so I said, whoa, if this person is running the show and they don't even know what's happening in this logger, then maybe I can also go and run something that I don't necessarily, right? And so really what that is just, managing a risk to those that are best suited to manage it.
Yeah.
Right. And so in that case, they were contracting that part of the job, that part of the operations to experts like ourselves, and they're just there to oversee things. And so that just shaped my worldview about what was possible, now knowing that I did not have to be the expert in everything, which
Yeah.
I think is what I had maybe learned inadvertently from being at Princeton.
That's wild, man. And
Yeah.
but a lot of times it's those moments like that, like those random epiphanies, like
Yeah.
serendipitous moments where it completely shifts your mindset.
Yep.
And I'm thinking you probably would have been really messed up if you didn't take that year off where years prior you had the mindset of like what you put in is what you get out.
Yep.
The harder I work,
Yep.
the better the end result's gonna be.
Oh my goodness.
You see 5 years later somebody walk in the door.
My head would have exploded.
Yeah. So it's like really got to shift your mindset.
Yeah.
And I imagine that changed your whole outlook on the way you work, how you work, working smarter, not just harder, but working smarter, probably emphasizing like the connections. Like what did you think about next after that epiphany? Like what was the goal for you, or what was the next kind of?
I wondered who else in the world works like this. I did.
Yeah.
And I had been thinking about starting something because to your point, I wanted to create an impact. And when you're working in these remote places, you'll come across scenarios where you have a well that's generating millions of dollars a month, and it's next to a community that's receiving very little of that economic benefit, right? And so it does something about your perspective.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, I wonder what other parts of the economy work like this. And I discovered that a whole bunch of just products in general, rely on just contracting and outsourcing to experts that know what they're doing, and you just managing the process. So that really, to me, said, I'm already managing a process. Why not I leverage those skills and go be a founder and create something that I think will be impactful?
Yeah.
So basically that planted the seeds and gave me the confidence that I can go off and I can build something.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I think a lot of people struggle with early on, where they feel like they have to be an expert in every single thing. I think that's a big epiphany that you had.
Yeah.
Is it what?
It's a shame though, as well. I know that I just cut you off, but
Go ahead. Let me hear it.
I was just thinking about this because we don't penalize children for making mistakes, right? As they learn, right?
Okay.
And so you take this all the way back to just when you're, I don't know, still developing motor skills or learning how to speak and stuff, right? You're exploring the world. And You're learning through experimentation. You're learning through trial and error.
Yeah.
And ultimately, you develop critical skills through that process, right? But no one looks at a toddler who's just fallen over and said, "Look at that toddler who just fell." Right? It's like, oh,
stupid. What are you
yeah,
doing?
right. It's like, wow, look at this thing trying to walk.
Yeah.
Right? Let's encourage him or her. Same thing when you're learning how to ride a bike, right?
Yeah.
And so I said that because it's a shame that at some point, and this is not true for everyone, but it's certainly true for me and our peer group, there starts to be a penalty for being incorrect, for that experimentation. And I think it makes people either risk averse or just makes them less open to experimentation.
Yeah.
Which is ultimately still a great form of learning and adapting and iterating.
I agree. Completely agree.
You know.
Real quick, tell me. So you decided to go off on your own, start your own company. You were a co-faunder of a company. What was that company? What was the goal behind it? The business model?
Yeah. So it was called Bebe Burkinabe, which in English really means like Burkinabe child or baby.
Okay.
And so again, getting back to this idea of impact, we said, well, knowing now that you don't have to be the expert, that you can rely on others, what do we want to build that we think would truly have an impact? And so we thought about all the different possibilities out there, right? Could be in disease management or curtailment, right? Could be in clean access to water, right?
Yeah.
And it just so happened that one of the most impactful things that you can do, and this is true in most places of the world, but the pain point varies, is just to provide proper micronutrients to mothers and to young children.
Okay.
And so there's just something about providing the body with key nutrients that it needs to sustain life and to grow, that if you don't do it in a kind of critical window, it makes it very difficult to recoup in your later years.
Gotcha.
And so once we knew that, then the sort of next step was, well, how do we think about a way of developing this in a way that's compatible with the communities that we want to impact? And so one of the interesting things for us is that if you look at the call it supplement market in West Africa and many places in Africa for that matter, the nutrients, the formulation, the packaging, the pricing, they're all very much rooted in Western design, right?
Makes sense. Yeah.
And some might ask, well, what's wrong with that, right? The most problematic part of that is, especially on the formulation side, the compounds that are used, and this pertains to iron and other metals like zinc, the compounds that are used are incompatible with common foods in local diets. So what that means is, in Burkina, for instance, or in Ghana, we eat a lot of sorghum, we eat a lot of cassava. And if you eat that and you also consume these, kind of, Western design, I'll say maternal health supplements,
Yeah.
those nutrients will bind with the phytic acid in the cassava or in the sorghum, and it'll essentially make the iron unavailable to your system.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so you're taking all these things that in theory should be helping the mother, helping the development of the fetus of the child.
Yeah.
But the reality is that very little of it is actually being absorbed and made available in the body.
Man,
Yeah.
that's really counterintuitive.
Yeah.
I think that really speaks to, like, I guess, finding that product market, not just finding a product market fit, but developing a solution for a particular community, like specializing it for them. I think most people would think like, hey, why can't, like you said, why
Yeah.
can't you just ship it, package it the same
Sure,
way,
sure.
same exact product that worked over here should work over there, but completely different diet, completely different culture, all of that. So that's very
Yeah.
interesting. Kind of want to talk about now, like that pivot. How'd you make? Where did that light bulb go off? Where you're like, okay, you've kind of already
Yeah.
analyzed the market. You're like, hey, I don't need to be an expert in everything. There's all these different spaces where you don't.
Yep.
I'm sure VC is one of them.
Yep.
You don't need a general expertise in one sector
Correct,
to be able to
correct.
write his check to
Correct.
that industry.
Correct.
When did you decide to make that pivot from like?
Yeah, so spoiler alert, company did not go on and become a unicorn.
Dang, it didn't.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sitting on $1 million of cash right now. Tragically, the problem still remains. So
Man.
if there's someone who's out there that's building in this space, I would love to write them a check.
I'm sure.
But
Okay.
the epiphany there was, and some of this also changes, right? But I think at the time that we were building, there was this notion in the markets that you had to do good or you had to be for profit, but you could not do both.
Okay.
And there's probably Gen Z right now that's going to say that's ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
Like those two kind of go hand in hand, double bottom profit line and all this stuff. But at that time, it was really you focus on one at the expense of the other, and so it was difficult for us to get interest from people that were just like purely financially motivated, and they sort of bucketed us into this kind of impact investing bracket. And then we also made a couple of stumbles as founders, right? Which I take a lot of accountability for. And I realized that I part of my personality, etc. It's tough to spend 8 to 10 years building something. It really is, like as passionate as I was, as impactful as this thing was, it takes a certain kind of person, to put aside their rationality and say, this is what I want to do for a decade.
Yeah.
And I just
tough.
didn't have it.
It's good that you came to that realization though.
Yeah. And so I think the next best thing that I could do then was, well, if I still want to have a say in sort of how the world is shaped and how technology is used to, hopefully improve things for the better, especially those that are underserved.
Yeah.
Can I help others? Can I enable others to pursue their dreams? So for those that have that characteristic of actually rolling with the punches and building for 8 to 10 years, can I be a small piece in their journey and maybe tip the odds in their favor? So that's when I became interested in finance.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
All right.
we can.
I saw that.
We
I
can
saw
kind of
that.
fast forward to this.
Yeah, I'll fast
section,
forward
but
through the finance part because I did see
yeah.
that you I guess
Yeah.
made some financial models and things
Yeah.
of that nature. So
Exactly.
okay,
Exactly.
so got into the VC space. Walk me quickly through like the hierarchy of the VC space for those who are interested. Like
Okay.
from entry level to what's the top level? Like managing partner or managing
GP,
GP
general partner.
general partner.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they are the ones who are running the fund.
Okay.
So the hierarchy of VC, it varies firm by firm.
Okay.
It really does. And one of the challenges I would say is that there's just a lot of heterogeneity within the market, right? There are firms that might be 5 people deep. There are firms that are hundreds of folks deep. And so the way that they structure their fund, their team, their portfolio support, all that varies, right? But in general, and this is kind of broad strokes, you have a couple different classes within the hierarchy. The entry position is usually an analyst. And this is someone who is helping source deals, right? So maybe helping with some research, helping identify founders, helping identify interesting trends, right? Maybe doing a first screen with founders, looking at the market that they're playing in. To what extent is the tech or the product differentiated? What is the upside there if we do make the bet? A lot of that responsibility falls into the purview of the analyst. Then kind of one step above that is you have the associate, right?
Okay.
And so this person might be doing heavier diligence on the companies. So once we've realized that, there might be an interesting play here, for instance, in the digital health space, right? Let's say that we're doing telemedicine for, I don't know, women of color, for instance, right? Because that could be an underserved community, right? The associate might come in and do more diligence around the economics of the model, right? They might do diligence around the extent to which that team can outcompete other teams. And they might be just doing diligence around, is this now the time to make the bet, right?
Yeah.
Telemedicine wasn't a huge talking point in 2018.
Not at all.
Right?
At all.
Exactly. And so the thesis of the timing also evolves, and the associates can help there. Some associates will write checks.
Okay.
This is a plug for 500 Global. If you come work with us, you can write checks as an associate. I've written checks. It's phenomenal. I love it. I can walk into a room and say, hey, if I like this team, I can pound the table and get them through my IC.
What's the biggest check you cut?
So the biggest check.
You personally?
Oh, personally or on behalf of the firm?
Well,
Okay.
Oh, you do angel too?
On behalf of the firm. I have, but there's a lot of conflict of interest now. So I'm kind of
Okay,
dialing
on behalf
back,
of the
but
firm,
on
yeah.
behalf of the firm, $500K.
Okay.
Yeah, $500K for a CA deal that's disrupting the telecom space.
Okay.
That I'm really excited about. And we can talk about that later.
Okay, cool. So associates can cut checks.
Exactly. Associates can cut checks. And then above the associates, you have principals.
Okay.
And so they are not quite at the partner stage.
Yeah.
But they are, they're sort of in between this position of helping diligence and select and screen companies, but also helping the firm in general think about its portfolio construction, helping with fundraising efforts. And so usually at the principal stage, you're on what's called the partner track. And so the partner, the general partner, ultimately is the one who sits on the investment committee of that fund, and they have a say in which deals get funded, which deals don't.
Okay.
Especially when it comes to follow-on checks for larger funds.
Gotcha.
In some cases, I might get this part a little bit wrong, right? But
It's fine.
ultimately, as the general partner,
Yeah.
not only are you on the investment committee, but you're also fundraising the fund.
Okay.
And so what that means is you have to go and pitch to LPs
Yeah.
and convince them to write you a check.
Yeah.
And people forget this all the time, or they remember it, but they don't really take it into consideration. VCs manage other people's money.
Yeah.
We have bosses.
Yeah.
And so in the same way that a founder comes to me and says, hey, Jordan, I'm thinking about building in the fintech space. I have this really interesting DeFi project. And I asked that founder, well, what separates you from the 80 others that are doing this? If you're managing a fund and you're fundraising from LPs, they're going to ask you the same question. Why is my money better off with you than another GP with a similar thesis about the market? Mm-hmm. And so to make it to that GP level, you have to be someone who can close checks for LPs.
Gotcha.
For your first fund, and then ultimately take the checks that you close, construct a portfolio in a way that outperforms the market. Because the best case that you can make as the GP is to say, hey, we have this particular thesis about the space, and these are the ways that we are going to outperform the market, right? So in the same way that I would look at stocks in the public equity space and say, well, why is this particular stock or sector going to outperform the S&P 500?
Yeah.
The general partners are also pitching to their LPs, we can generate you alpha because there's something different about our sourcing. There's something different about our risk selection. There's something different about the way that we can generate deals.
Gotcha. Real quick follow-up question to that. I don't want to take too much time on it, but been listening to or reading Blitzscaling.
Okay.
And I think in that book, I think Reid Hoffman kind of talks about the role of a VC firm is to triple that investment. Is that still kind of the rules to the game, or are you guys looking for even larger hits, bigger home
Yeah, yeah,
runs?
yeah, 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 yeah. I think we spoke about this, right? Like
Yeah,
one late evening here or
yeah,
something, right? I I, I would say that, you know, the firms of yesteryear, kind of the vintage of yesteryear, tripling is fine. What people don't, or what people sometimes forget, is that the tripling or so, 3xing, needs to include carry, right?
okay,
And so the way that the operating model works for VC is to say, okay, I'm a general partner, right? I'm going out, I'm raising, let's say, 100 million. I'll scale it back. Let's say I'm raising a $20 million, early stage fund. I want to go and write checks in digital health, right? Because I
yeah,
think that there's something interesting about the space that's been catalyzed by COVID, yada 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 yada. Well, I'm going to need analysts, right, to help me source. I'm going to need associates to help me screen, principal, etc. I'm going to need to pay myself. I'm going to need a back office.
yeah,
All these expenses get paid from the fund management fees.
okay,
And so once you start to, partition away these
yeah,
expenses and overhead and stuff, you actually have to generate returns that are much higher than 3x to have a 3x on the overall return of the
gotcha.
fund. So you're probably thinking more towards a 5x,
Okay,
honestly,
wow,
in order to be, call it tier one or competitive
okay.
from a returns perspective. Yeah.
Cool. I just wanted to ask you
Yeah.
about that because I think from the founder standpoint, I guess that's something that they should kind of keep in mind when pitching or thinking like, hey, is this a good firm for me to pitch to, or what is this firm kind of going to look for them? All right, that concludes part one of Jordan's interview. I hope you all really enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you hit the like button and do me a big favor and hit the subscribe button below. Also, make sure you stay tuned for part two of Jordan's interview. In the second part of this discussion, we kind of take a deeper dive into the world of VC. We touch on a few things that most startup founders should avoid, lessons learned, and then also how you can be a VC associate. So make sure you stay tuned for that. That'll be dropping next week. I'll see you all soon. Stay tuned.